My name is Captain Olivia Anderson, 32 years old, and I'm the strong one in my family. The one who can handle anything, from a firefight in Afghanistan to the casual cruelty of my own blood. That night, at an upscale restaurant, my father called me selfish in front of everyone, all while praising my sister Scarlett's free spirit. But they didn't know their strong one had reached her breaking point. After years of funding my sister's lifestyle with my combat pay, I finally told the truth. The look of sheer shock on their faces when I exposed it all, right down to Scarlett's new designer bag, bought with my money, was more satisfying than any medal. Before I tell you every word that shattered their perfect world, let me know where you're listening from. Like and hit that follow button if you've ever given everything, only to be taken for granted. I sat with my back straight, a habit from the service, in a plush velvet chair at the Marine Room. The Pacific Ocean was putting on a show for us, the high tide sending waves crashing against the panoramic glass just below our feet. The sound was a deep, rhythmic percussion to the evening's performance. My father, Richard Anderson, was in his element, holding court with his business partners. His voice, rich and confident, boomed across the table as he recounted the final details of a multi-million-dollar real estate deal in La Jolla. Beside him, my stepmother, Genevieve, played her part perfectly, her smile a permanent, placid fixture. And next to her, my sister Scarlett nodded and smiled, a vision in a silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was a princess at a royal ball, every gesture graceful and practiced. Then there was me. In my simple, unadorned black dress, I felt like a soldier in the wrong uniform, an anomaly at their victory parade. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, Baccarat Rouge, I guessed, and the metallic tang of money, both old and new. It was a carefully constructed reality, a theater of success, and I was the one piece that didn't fit. I belonged to a world of consequence, of cause and effect, of actions that had permanent, irreversible outcomes. This world, their world, felt like it was all performance. When the waiter arrived, a young man with a starched collar and a smile that hovered between professional and awestruck, my father ordered without a glance at the menu. "I'll have the tomahawk steak, medium rare, and a bottle of the Euro 8 Opus 1. The order was a statement, an assertion of power meant for his guests. The waiter bowed his head slightly. Scarlett, ever the delicate flower, chose the pan-seared scallops with a saffron risotto. Then, all eyes turned to me. The collective weight of their attention felt like a physical pressure. "And for the captain?" the waiter asked, his tone respectful. "Just the grilled chicken salad, thank you," I said, my voice even and calm. My father's brow furrowed in a theatrical display of disapproval. I watched him build the moment, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "A salad? For God's sake, Olivia. Can't you let loose for once? This is a celebration." He turned to his guests, a sweeping gesture that included everyone at the table but me. His smile was wide, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This is my eldest, a captain in the Marines." He paused, letting the title hang in the air for a moment, as if it were an exotic but slightly inconvenient fact. "Very disciplined, but sometimes I wonder if she knows how to live." Polite, strained laughter rippled around the table. It wasn't a joke, it was a public assessment, a warning shot announcing my perceived failings. I kept my posture perfect, my hands resting in my lap, and focused on the flickering flame of the candle in the center of the table. I didn't flinch. I just absorbed the impact, the way a sandbag absorbs a bullet. Scarlett, as always, saw her opening and took it. She placed a delicate hand on my father's arm, a gesture of solidarity. "Liv is always saving, Dad," she cooed, her voice dripping with a faux concern that was her specialty. She shot me a quick, unreadable glance before turning her full attention back to him. "She's probably saving up for something important." The words sounded innocent, but they were a poisoned dart, and my father was more than willing to drive it home. He set his wineglass down with a definitive thud, the deep red liquid sloshing against the crystal. He fixed his gaze on me, his expression hardening into one of undisguised disappointment. It was a look I'd known my entire life, a look that said, not enough, never enough. Saving, he scoffed, the word sharp and dismissive. I call it selfish. You see your sister here? Scarlett knows how to invest in herself, her brand, her online presence, her relationships. That's how you get ahead in this world. That's a smart investment. His eyes swept over my simple dress, my lack of jewelry, as if they were evidence of a crime. And what about you? All you know is your work and your four walls. We gave you everything, Olivia, the best schools, every opportunity. And you repay us by living like a pauper. Selfish. The word hung in the air, heavier than the oppressive humidity, louder than the crashing waves outside. It silenced the table. I looked at my father's self-satisfied face, at Genevieve's placid smile of silent agreement, and at Scarlett's carefully crafted mask of pity. Her eyes, however, held a flicker of pure, unadulterated triumph. She had won. For a moment, I wasn't in La Jolla anymore. The clinking of silverware faded, replaced by the memory of sand whipping against canvas. I was back in a tent in Kandahar, the air tasting of dust and burnt diesel fuel. I was forcing down a cold MRE, meal, ready to eat. The processed chicken tasting like salty cardboard after a 24-hour patrol. I remembered the static crackle of the satellite phone as I painstakingly transferred my entire hazard pay supplement back to the States. Every last cent. Sent home so Scarlett could make rent on her luxury apartment in downtown San Diego. So she could continue her healing journey and find her creative purpose. A deep, profound chill spread through my body, starting in my chest and radiating out to my fingertips. It was the cold of absolute, undeniable clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. My training kicked in, a lifetime of discipline taking over my nervous system. It locked my expression into a neutral mask, kept my breathing steady, my spine rigid. A soldier never ever reveals a weakness to the enemy. But inside, something had fractured. The foundation I had built my life on. Quiet sacrifice, unwavering responsibility. The steadfast belief that being the strong one was a noble duty. It all crumbled under the weight of that single, cruel word. They saw my discipline as deprivation. They saw my sacrifice as selfishness. They had built their world of comfort and illusion on my quiet strength, and then condemned me for possessing it. My mind, trained to assess threats in fractions of a second, began to connect the dots. The casual dismissal, the public humiliation, the financial drain. It wasn't a series of isolated incidents. It was a pattern, a strategy. And in that moment, I realized my enemy was sitting right in front of me. The only question that echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of my mind was, why did I ever let this happen? That night, sleep was a foreign country I couldn't get a visa for. Every time I closed my eyes, the scene from the restaurant played on a loop. The image of my father raising that glass of Opus One, his face flushed with pride and arrogance, was burned into my mind. It felt familiar. And as I tossed and turned in the quiet of my San Diego apartment, that image snagged on the edge of another, much older memory, pulling it from the depths. It was my college graduation. I had finished at the top of my class, summa cum laude, and was the distinguished graduate from my university's ROTC program. My reward was a celebratory dinner at Applebee's. I remember the sticky menus and the sound of a nearby table singing "Happy Birthday" off-key. My father had clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was both congratulatory and dismissive. "You've learned to take care of yourself, Liv," he'd said, his voice loud over the restaurant's pop music. "That's the greatest reward there is." He made it sound like my independence was a gift I'd given him, the gift of his own freedom from responsibility. Just 6 months later, Scarlett dropped out of a prestigious design school halfway through her second semester. There was no lecture on responsibility. Instead, my father bought her a brand new, brilliant white Audi A5 convertible. He said it was to inspire her creativity. He threw a lavish catered party at their house in La Jolla, inviting dozens of friends and neighbors. I stood in the corner of their sprawling backyard, watching him raise a glass of champagne. My girl Scarlett just needs to know that her family will always be a safety net, he announced to the crowd. No matter how many times she stumbles, we'll be here to catch her. Listening to him, a cold realization settled in my stomach. The safety net was real, but it was woven for one. For the other daughter, the strong one, there was only the hard ground. But no memory, no slight, cut as deep as the day I graduated from officer candidate school in Quantico, Virginia. In the life of a Marine, few days hold more weight. It's the culmination of grueling months of physical and mental torment. The day you finally earn the title and the rank of second lieutenant. It was the most significant day of my professional life, and I wanted my father to see it. I wanted him to see me not as his strange, disciplined daughter, but as an officer. I used my own meager savings to buy him a plane ticket from San Diego to Virginia, clinging to the naive hope that this time it would be different. This time, he would be proud. That morning, I stood in formation on the parade deck, the humid Virginia sun beating down on my perfectly starched uniform. My shoes were shined to a mirror finish, my posture was ramrod straight. All around me, a sea of families buzzed with anticipation, cameras ready, faces beaming with pride. I scanned the bleachers, my heart pounding with a foolish, childish hope. He wasn't there. Just as the ceremony was about to begin, I felt the faintest vibration from the small pocket in my uniform. A text message. My hands, steady through every obstacle course and marksmanship test, trembled as I pulled out my phone. It was from him. The message was short, almost an afterthought. Congrats, kiddo. In Napa for a wine festival with Scarlett. She really needed a break to de-stress. Sending love. I read the words once, then twice. Napa. She needed a break. My vision blurred. All around me, the ceremony began. Names were being called. New lieutenants were stepping forward, their parents or spouses rushing onto the field to pin the gold bars on their collars. I watched fathers embracing their sons, mothers weeping with joy as they hugged their daughters. Every embrace was a fresh stab of pain. My own father was swirling a Cabernet in a picturesque valley hundreds of miles away, helping my sister de-stress. You're the strong one, Liv. He'd always said that, ever since I was a little girl. I used to think it was a compliment. That day, standing alone on that parade deck, I finally understood what it really was. It wasn't a compliment, it was a hall pass. A lifetime exemption from the duties of fatherhood. Because I was strong, he didn't need to show up. Because I was strong, he didn't need to comfort me. Because I was strong, he could pour all his time, money, and affection into the child he deemed weaker, the one who truly needed him. I had become the silent sentinel of the family, the soldier standing guard on the front lines, ensuring the perimeter was secure so they could have their parties safely behind the wire. Years later, I tried to explain this feeling to my biological mother, who had long since remarried and moved to Oregon. I called her, my voice cracking as I recounted the years of casual neglect. She listened patiently, and when I was done, she let out a long, weary sigh. Oh, honey, you know your father. He's just clumsy with his feelings, she said, her voice distant. And Scarlett, she's always been more sensitive than you. You're the big sister. You have to be tough for her. Her words, though likely well-intentioned, were just another blade twisting the knife. She was validating his narrative. I had to be tough. I had to sacrifice. I had to accept it. She had taught me to normalize the injustice, to wrap it in the noble-sounding blanket of a sister's duty. And I, a daughter so desperate for any kind of love, believed her. I accepted my role. A role that had a very real, very tangible cost that would show up on my bank statement for years to come. After a sleepless night spent cataloging past injustices, the first thing I did when the pale morning light filtered through my blinds was reach for my phone. It's a soldier's instinct. Assess the situation, review the facts. I opened my banking app. The numbers on the screen were clear, cold, and unforgiving. They didn't have an opinion. They just stated the truth. There it was, a recurring transaction on the first of every month. $1,400 outgoing transfer. The memo line simply read, Scarlett Rent. It had been happening for 22 months. A quick mental calculation made my stomach clench. Over $30,000. That money had come from my savings, from the hazard pay and combat pay supplements I had earned in Afghanistan. Money earned in a place where the daily soundtrack was the distant crump of artillery, and the air was thick with the constant low-grade fear of the unknown. That $30,000 had a purpose. It was supposed to be the down payment on a small condo in North Park, maybe a two-bedroom I could finally call my own. A place to hang my medals, a place to feel safe, a place that was just for me. Instead, that money was paying for a loft apartment with a bay view that I had never even been invited to see. It was funding a life I couldn't afford for a sister who felt entitled to it. I closed the app and tossed my phone onto the nightstand. Outside my window, the engine of my 20-year-old Honda Civic turned over with a strained, rattling cough. It was a sound that had become the background music to my life, a constant mechanical mockery of my dream of a home. Later, while making coffee, I fell into the trap I always do. I opened Instagram. It's a stupid habit, a form of self-punishment I can't seem to quit. And there she was. Scarlett's profile was a cascade of professionally curated stories. The first was a picture of her bare feet on a woven yoga mat, the sunrise casting a golden glow. The caption read, "Finding my inner balance. Self-care. Healing journey. Authenticity." The next was a short, breathtaking video of the sun setting over the rolling, oak-studded hills of Ojai. Then, the inevitable selfie. She was glowing, dressed head to toe in a brand new Lululemon outfit, her smile radiant and carefree. The caption for that one was a real piece of work, learning to let go of what no longer serves you. I looked down at my own breakfast, a bowl of instant oatmeal that tasted like wallpaper paste and a cup of Folgers instant coffee. I found myself wondering, with a bitter, acidic taste rising in my throat, if my $400 a month was serving her healing journey. The irony was so thick I felt like I could choke on it. She was learning to let go, and I was the thing she was letting go of. My money, my sacrifice, my future. This burden wasn't just financial. It was 1,000 tiny paper cuts to my own life. It was the weight of a constant, draining no. I had to say no when my best friend from college got married in New York, lying that I couldn't get the time off from the base when the truth was I couldn't afford the plane ticket. I had to say no when my boyfriend, Liam, wanted to take a weekend ski trip to Big Bear, pretending I hated the cold when really I just couldn't justify the expense of a lift ticket and gear rental. I had to lie to him, telling him I wasn't much of a traveler, when in reality, my soul ached to see the world on my own terms, not just through the armored window of a Humvee. Every time my old Honda made a new, unfamiliar noise, a clunk from the suspension, a squeal from the brakes, my heart would seize in my chest. I wasn't afraid of the car breaking down. I was terrified of the repair bill that would follow, a bill I knew I couldn't pay without going into debt. I was a captain in the United States Marine Corps, an officer with immense responsibility. Yet I was living paycheck to paycheck like a brand new private. All of this entire constricted life, was a secret I kept so that my little sister could continue to play the part of a carefree, bohemian artist, unburdened by the vulgarities of money. I could still hear her voice from that phone call 2 years ago. She had been sobbing, a hysterical, breathless sound that immediately put me on high alert. Her live-in boyfriend had kicked her out, she'd wailed, and she was broke, completely penniless. "Just for a few months, Liv, I swear," she'd cried, "just until I can get back on my feet." A few months had become a permanent state of being. The initial agreement had morphed into a toxic, unspoken contract. Every time I gently tried to bring it up to ask about her job search or her finances, she had a new crisis ready to deploy. "I'm just so depressed right now, I can't even think about a 9 to 5. Or, "My new art project is about to take off, I can feel it." And if I pushed, even slightly, the waterworks would start. "You can't do this to me. You're my sister. You're the strong one." She had weaponized my love, turning my sense of duty into a cage. And the loyalty of a soldier, the ingrained code of "leave no man behind," had kicked in. I had applied it to my own family. And in doing so, I had locked myself inside. Before I continue, show your support for this soldier with a like if you think she deserves a hell of a lot better. And in the comments, I want you to do something for me. Just type the single word, strong, if you have ever been told that you have to carry the burden because you're the strong one. Let me know I'm not alone out here. That evening, I was adrift in a sea of negative thoughts, replaying every condescending word, every dismissive glance. The silence in my small apartment was deafening, amplifying the feeling of being utterly alone in the cage my sister had so expertly built around me. I was staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the plaster, when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a picture of Liam, his arm around me on a hike up Cowles Mountain, both of us grinning into the sun. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't have the energy to lie, but I answered. "Hey, you okay?" His voice was warm, steady, and immediately grounding. "How was the big family dinner?" My default programming kicked in. The standard issue response, the one I'd used 100 times before, was already on my lips. It was fine, but something in the genuine concern in his voice chipped away at my defenses. It wasn't a polite inquiry. He actually wanted to know. The wall I had so carefully constructed around my feelings began to crumble. I was silent for a long moment, the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. I took a breath, and the truth just fell out. "It was awful, Liam," I heard myself say, my voice raspy with unshed tears. "It was a disaster." And then, for the first time, I told him. Not the whole 2 year saga of financial sacrifice. That felt too heavy, too complicated to unload in a single phone call. But I told him about the dinner. I described the restaurant, the condescending toast, the sting of my father's disappointment. I told him how it felt to be called selfish for ordering a salad, for being the person they had molded me to be. The words tumbled out, messy and unfiltered, a raw debriefing of a battle I hadn't even realized I was losing so badly. As I spoke, I braced myself for the usual placating responses, the ones I'd heard my whole life. "I'm sure he didn't mean it like that." Or the classic, "Well, that's just family." I expected him to try and smooth things over, to offer a logical explanation for their cruelty. But Liam didn't do that. He just listened. He let the silence hang after I finished, giving my words room to breathe. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but held the force of a tidal wave. "That's not fair, Liv," he said simply. "You don't deserve to be treated like that." Just that. No judgment, no excuses, no attempts to fix it. Just pure, simple validation. With those few words, an invisible, crushing weight I hadn't even known I was carrying was lifted from my shoulders. It was as if I'd been walking for miles with a 100-pound pack, and someone had finally told me I was allowed to set it down. For the first time, I didn't feel crazy for being hurt. I felt seen. An hour later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Liam standing on my doorstep, a warm Pyrex dish in one hand and a book in the other. The rich, savory scent of cumin and chili powder filled my small entryway. "I figured you could use a decent meal," he said with a soft smile, handing me the container of his homemade chili con carne, my favorite comfort food. "And this, too." He held out the book. It was Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. She writes a lot about the courage to show up and be seen, to step into the arena. Figured it might be useful. His thoughtfulness was so direct, so disarmingly kind, that it almost brought me to my tears. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was something better. It was quiet, practical care. It was seeing a need and meeting it without any expectation of praise or reward. That night, we didn't talk much more about my family. We didn't need to. We sat on my worn-out sofa, ate chili straight from the bowls, and watched an old black-and-white movie on TV. His presence beside me was a silent statement. "You are not alone. I am on your side." He wasn't my family by blood, but in that moment, he gave me the sense of safety and unconditional acceptance that I had been chasing my entire life from people who were either unable or unwilling to give it. After Liam left, I sat in the quiet of my living room and picked up the book. I opened it to a random page. A sentence, underlined by a previous reader, jumped out at me. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence, it's a necessity. I flipped a few more pages. Another quote caught my eye. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. Those words were like seeds being planted in the dry, barren soil of my soul. They felt foreign and radical. Boundaries, self-compassion. For years, my operating system had been built on self-denial and unwavering duty. The idea of setting a boundary felt like an act of betrayal. The idea of having compassion for myself felt like a weakness. I didn't have a plan. I was still scared and confused. But for the first time in a very long time, as I sat there with a belly full of warm chili and a mind full of new ideas, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe being the strong one didn't mean enduring everything. Maybe real strength was knowing when to say, enough. The days following that evening with Liam were a fragile piece. The words from Brené Brown's book echoed in my head, acting like a new kind of armor. Boundaries, self-compassion. The concepts were still foreign, but for the first time, they felt possible. I was starting to believe I could learn a new way to operate, a new way to be strong that didn't require me to set myself on fire to keep others warm. The quiet hope was a tentative green shoot pushing up through cracked concrete. Then, my phone rang. The screen displayed Scarlett's name, and the fragile piece shattered. I took a deep, tactical breath, the kind I take before stepping into a tense situation, and braced myself for the inevitable onslaught, a storm of tears, a barrage of accusations, or a guilt-laden monologue. I prepared my defenses, but the voice on the other end of the line was gentle, uncharacteristically so. "Liv?" she began, her voice small and trembling. "Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry about dinner the other night. Dad was way out of line." She paused, and I could hear a shaky intake of breath. "And I know you've sacrificed a lot for me. I really do." I was stunned into silence. In all our years, I'd never heard anything remotely resembling an admission of fault from her. Never an acknowledgement of the one-sided nature of our relationship. That foolish, stubborn part of me, the part that still yearned for the sister I always wished I had, began to stir. Hope, that treacherous emotion, started to flicker back to life. Maybe she understood. Maybe we could finally fix this. "Actually," she continued, her voice gaining a bit of strength, "that's why I'm calling. I want to start making changes. I'm done depending on everyone." My foolish heart soared. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. She launched into an excited, breathless story about a huge opportunity she'd found. A booth at the annual San Diego Artisan Fair in Balboa Park. She painted a vivid picture of her selling her handcrafted jewelry, of tourists and locals admiring her work. "This is my chance to launch a real business, Liv. To finally stand on my own 2 feet." And then came the hook. "The thing is, the registration fee is due tomorrow, and I'm exactly $500 short." She rushed the words out as if embarrassed to ask. "I swear this is the last time, the absolute last. I'll pay you back as soon as I sell my first few pieces, I promise." To seal the deal, she immediately sent a text with a link. I clicked it. A professional-looking website popped up. San Diego Artisan Fair, celebrating Southern California's finest crafters. It had photos of bustling crowds, testimonials from past vendors, and a prominent "Register Now" button. It all looked so legitimate. The words of Brené Brown about boundaries felt a million miles away. The memory of Liam's quiet support faded. All I could hear was the voice of my little sister, finally sounding like she wanted to grow up. The desperate hope for reconciliation drowned out the quiet voice of reason in my head. This is it, I thought. This is my chance to help her help herself. This isn't a handout, it's an investment in her independence. My fingers moved on their own, opening my banking app. I typed in the amount, added her name, and hit send. For the next 2 days, I waited, expecting to see Instagram stories of Scarlett frantically making jewelry, covered in clay or threading beads. But there was nothing. Just silence. By the 3rd day, a familiar knot of unease tightened in my gut. Curiosity, tinged with dread, got the better of me. I opened her profile, and there it was, a brand new post, uploaded less than an hour ago. The picture was unmistakable. Scarlett was lounging on a plush deck chair next to a sparkling blue swimming pool at what was clearly a high-end resort hotel. She was in Santa Barbara. The distinct red-tiled roofs and palm trees were a dead giveaway. She held a vibrant, umbrella-adorned cocktail in one hand, and slung over her shoulder was the brand-new Fendi bag I had seen her admiring at the restaurant. Her smile was blinding. The caption read, "Sometimes you just need a spontaneous getaway to recharge that creative energy." Self-love. Santa Barbara vibes. The blood in my veins turned to ice. My hands felt numb. With a sickening sense of finality, I navigated back to the text she'd sent me. I clicked the link to the artisan fair again. This time, the page was different. Plain white background, stark black letters. Error, 404, page not found. I had been played, masterfully. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone against the wall. The emotion that washed over me wasn't hurt or sadness. It was something far colder, far sharper. It was a rage so pure and absolute it felt like ice water flooding my system. She hadn't just taken my money, she had taken my hope, that last stubborn shred of hope for a real relationship. And she had laughed at it. She had used my deep-seated desire for reconciliation as a weapon against me. This wasn't a moment of weakness on her part. This was calculated. She had built a fake website. She had rehearsed a script. She had methodically, and without a flicker of conscience, defrauded her own sister. I walked to my window and looked out, my gaze drifting east toward MKS Miramar. On the base, we were trained to identify the enemy, to study their tactics, to understand their motivations. We were taught to never turn our backs on the battlefield. And in that cold, quiet moment, I finally understood. My battlefield had shifted, and the enemy was no longer an ocean away. I was still staring at the error 404 page on my phone, the digital tombstone of my final hope, when it started ringing again. The screen lit up with a familiar picture, my father, smiling on his yacht, the very image of success. The ice-cold rage that had settled in my bones began to solidify, turning my veins to lead. This was a confrontation I hadn't planned for, but my entire life had been training for it. I let it ring twice, a small, deliberate act of defiance. Then I answered, my voice deliberately flat. "Hello." "Olivia," he boomed, his voice radiating a cheerful ignorance that was so complete it was almost an art form. "I've got fantastic news." I said nothing. My silence was a dead zone, a vacuum intended to signal that something was wrong, but he either didn't notice or didn't care. It was like shouting into a hurricane. "Your sister Scarlett has finally found her true passion. Sculpture, can you believe it? She showed me some of her ideas, and they're brilliant, absolutely brilliant. There's a very prestigious master course down in Laguna Beach, and I've decided to sponsor her. It's exactly what she needs to get her career off the ground." I remained silent, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, focusing on the sound to keep my own voice steady. He plowed on, oblivious to the deadly stillness on my end of the line. "Of course, the tuition is, well, it's steep, a real commitment. And I was thinking, you should contribute a portion. It would be a wonderful gesture of sisterly support. After all, this is your sister's future we're talking about. Think of it as an investment in her happiness." An investment? The word detonated in the silence of my apartment. An investment in the future of a woman who had just used my last $500 to fund a luxury vacation with a designer handbag. In the future of his golden child, whose creativity he was willing to finance with a blank check, while my own real-world accomplishments were treated like a quaint hobby. He hadn't even asked. He hadn't inquired about my finances, my life, or my well-being after the disastrous dinner. He had simply dialed my number with the full expectation that I would perform my designated function. The family ATM. The emotionless, endlessly renewable resource. The dam inside me didn't just break. It vaporized in a flash of heat and pressure. "No," I said. The word was quiet, devoid of any anger or emotion. It was a simple statement of fact, a closed door. It stopped him cold. A beat of confused silence. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine disbelief, as if I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "I said no," I repeated, my voice a little louder this time, each syllable sharp and distinct like rounds being chambered into a rifle. "I will not be giving her another dime. And frankly, neither should you." The cheerful facade vanished from his voice, replaced by a low growl of indignation. The king was not accustomed to being challenged in his own court. "How dare you speak to me like that?" he snapped. "After everything this family has done for you?" And that was it. That was the final insult. The trigger. The years of suppressed anger, of swallowed pride, of silent suffering. They erupted with the force of a breaching charge. "Done for me?" I shot back, my voice suddenly like steel, sharp enough to cut glass. "What exactly has this family done for me? Was it leaving me to graduate from officer candidate school completely alone, standing in a crowd of celebrating families while you were at a wine festival? Was it taking the combat pay I earned in a place where people were actively trying to kill me and using it to pay my sister's rent for 2 straight years?" I was barely breathing now, the words pouring out of me in a torrent of righteous fury. A full accounting of a debt that could never be repaid. Or maybe it was the $500 I was scammed out of just last week. Money she told me was for an art fair, complete with a fake website, so she could go on a shopping spree in Santa Barbara with her new Fendi bag? The same week you sat across from me in a $1,000 suit and had the audacity to call me selfish? The other end of the line went completely quiet. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of my heart against my ribs. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head as he tried to process the information I had just deployed. He was a businessman who prided himself on knowing all the angles, and I had just revealed a catastrophic intelligence failure that exposed the rotten foundation of his perfect family. When I spoke again, the fire in my voice was gone. It had burned through all the pain and anger, leaving behind something clean and hard and unbreakable. My voice was calm, the unwavering tone of an officer issuing a final, non-negotiable order. "The financial support ends," I stated, my voice as level as a rifle sight. "Effective in 30 days. She has 1 month to get a job and figure out how to support herself, like every other adult on the planet. This is not a discussion. This is not a negotiation." I paused, letting the words sink in, each one a nail in the coffin of our old relationship. "This is an announcement." Before he could form a response, before he could muster an argument or unleash his anger, I pressed the red icon on my screen. The line went dead. My hand was trembling, my heart was hammering against my chest like it wanted out. But for the first time in my entire life, I felt like I could actually breathe. The air in my lungs felt clean, pure. If you've ever dreamed of having the courage to make a call like that, hit that like button right now. And I need to know you're with me on this mission. Comment with the word "done" if you believe it's time for Olivia to be done with all of it. In the Marines, our motto is Semper Fidelis, always faithful. For years, I had been faithful to the wrong people. I'd been loyal to a distorted idea of family, to a role I was never meant to play. That day, hanging up the phone on my father, I finally completed the most difficult mission of my life. I was finally faithful to myself. The moment I hung up on my father, the counteroffensive began. My phone exploded. It wasn't just buzzing, it was a sustained vibration, a constant digital assault. A barrage of texts from my father landed in rapid succession, each one a different shade of emotional blackmail. The first was wounded. "You're tearing this family apart." The next was threatening. "You will live to regret this." Scarlett, meanwhile, chose a different tactic. A series of tearful, rambling voicemail messages accusing me of being heartless, jealous, and incapable of understanding the soul of an artist. In the past, this coordinated attack would have shattered my resolve. I would have been flooded with guilt, desperate to make peace at any cost. But the woman who had answered that phone call was not the same one who was sitting here now. The ice in my veins hadn't thawed. It had hardened into purpose. I didn't reply. I didn't even listen to the voicemails past the first few histrionic seconds. Instead, I silenced all notifications. Then I walked over to my desk, took out a clean legal pad and a pen. In the Marine Corps, we are taught that chaos is the enemy. You don't react to a crisis, you manage it. You face it with a plan. At the top of the crisp yellow page, I wrote a title in clean block letters: Operation Personal Freedom. Beneath it, I drew up a mission statement, defined my objectives, listed potential threats, and outlined my courses of action. I was applying the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act, to the mess of my own life. I was treating my family like a military campaign. A small, sad part of me ached at the thought. This wasn't a foreign adversary. This was my father, my sister. But the larger, more rational part of me knew the truth. This was the only way to survive. The first phase of any operation is to consolidate your forces and secure your allies. I had one, and he was the only one I needed. I called Liam. "Hey, are you free? I need a strategist." When he arrived a short time later, I had the legal pad laid out on my coffee table like a battle map. I gave him the full situation report, the phone call with my father, the 30-day ultimatum, and my assessment of the enemy's probable reactions. More guilt trips, attempts to isolate me, maybe even a direct confrontation. Liam listened intently, his expression serious, nodding at key points. He wasn't shocked or afraid. He didn't tell me I was overreacting. He looked at my notes, then looked at me, and his eyes were filled with respect. "This is a good plan, Liv. A solid plan." He tapped the notepad. "But you need more firepower, the legal kind. You should, at the very least, have a consultation with a lawyer. Understand your rights, just in case they try to pull something with finances or property down the line. It's about protecting your flank." Then he reached across the table and took my hand, his grip firm and steady. "You don't have to fight this alone," he said, his voice quiet but unwavering. "I'm your rear guard. I've got your back." That simple military metaphor, coming from him, a civilian, meant more than he could ever know. The next phase was intelligence gathering. On Liam's advice, I began to assemble my evidence file. This wasn't about revenge, it was about ammunition for defense. I went through my bank records and took screenshots of every single $1,400 transfer to Scarlett over the past 2 years, highlighting the dates. I scrolled back through 2 years of text messages, saving every manipulative plea, every broken promise of just a few more months. I found the old email from my father, the one he sent after I got my first promotion, where he explicitly stated that I didn't need any financial help since the military takes care of its own. And most importantly, I saved the screenshots of Scarlett's Santa Barbara Instagram story, the poolside picture, the Fendi bag, the carefree caption, along with a screenshot of the Error 404 page from the fake art fair. Each piece of evidence I collected was like a steel plate being added to my body armor. It solidified my resolve, erasing any lingering whisper of doubt. The facts were the facts. The final phase was establishing my perimeter and defining my rules of engagement. I knew the phone calls and texts were just the opening salvo. They would demand a face-to-face confrontation, an ambush, and I would be ready for it. I sat down and wrote out my script, the exact phrases I would use, the boundaries I would enforce. 1. I love you, but I will no longer fund Scarlett's lifestyle. 2. I will not engage in discussions that involve criticism, comparison, or blame. 3. If this conversation becomes toxic or disrespectful, I will leave. These were my rules of engagement. I would not be dragged into a chaotic, emotional firefight where they held all the advantages. I would not allow them to dictate the terms. This time, I would control the battlefield. I would define the time, the place, and the subject of the engagement. I looked down at my notes, at the collected evidence on my laptop, at the simple, powerful rules I had written for myself. The fear was still there, a low hum in the background. But for the first time, it was overshadowed by something else. Readiness. I was ready. Just as I had anticipated in my battle plan, they didn't wait long. A few days after the phone call, as I was driving my old Honda toward the main gate of MKS Miramar. After a long day, I saw it. Parked in the civilian waiting area just off to the side, my father's gleaming black Mercedes sat like a panther waiting to pounce, as out of place here as a tuxedo at a firing range. Its polished surface reflected the harsh afternoon sun, a beacon of La Jolla wealth in a world of desert camouflage and government-issue vehicles. My entire body went on high alert. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. This was it, the ambush. As I pulled to a stop in the outgoing lane, preparing to show my ID to the young Marine on guard duty, they both got out. My father strode forward with an air of absolute authority, moving to position himself directly in the path of my car. Scarlett trailed behind him, a study in practiced misery. Her shoulders were slumped, her eyes were already red and puffy, and she clutched a tissue in her hand. She had come prepared for her role as the tragic victim. "We need to talk, Olivia," my father said, his voice carrying the same commanding tone he used to close business deals. It wasn't a request, it was a summons. They had chosen their battlefield, but they had chosen poorly. They thought they were cornering me, confronting me in my world to show me how little it mattered compared to theirs. But they had crossed a line, a physical perimeter into my territory, a place where their rules of wealth and influence meant nothing. Here, I wasn't just Olivia Anderson, the dutiful, problematic daughter. Here, I was Captain Anderson, an officer of the United States Marine Corps, and every Marine standing guard at this gate knew my rank and my name. They had made a very big, very public mistake. I put the car in park, killed the engine, and stepped out into the oppressive heat. The hot asphalt radiated the day's sun, and the familiar sound of jet engines practicing overhead was a visceral roar that felt like home. I didn't walk toward them. I stood my ground beside the driver's side door of my car, planted my feet shoulder-width apart, and crossed my arms over my chest. It was a relaxed but authoritative stance, one I used when addressing my junior officers before a mission briefing. "You have 5 minutes," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion, and pitched just loud enough to be heard over the jets. "We'll talk right here." My father looked stunned, his power play instantly deflated by my refusal to engage on his terms. "What are you talking about? Get in the car," he commanded, gesturing toward his Mercedes. "We'll go to a coffee shop and discuss this like a civilized family." "No," I replied, my gaze unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my place of work. You and Scarlett are currently impeding traffic and creating a potential security issue at a federal military installation." I let that sink in for a second, using the official terminology to reinforce the reality of where they were. "You have 5 minutes before I have no choice but to call the MPs to deal with a security disturbance at the main gate." The threat landed exactly as I intended. The color drained from my father's tanned face. He was a man who understood power and leverage, and he knew with absolute certainty that I was not bluffing. The word MP had turned his home field advantage into a catastrophic liability. He was no longer a powerful CEO, he was a civilian causing a problem on government property. Seeing her father falter, Scarlett immediately launched into her pre-planned maneuver. The tears started to flow, great, heaving sobs designed for maximum effect. "How can you do this to me?" she cried, her voice cracking with practiced despair. "I'm your sister. I'll be homeless. I'll be out on the street because of you." "You will not be out on the street," I countered, my voice as cold and hard as a block of ice. I looked directly at her, past the tears, past the performance, meeting her eyes with a look that held no pity. "You will find a roommate. You will get a job. Maybe 2 jobs, like other people do. You will learn to live within your means. It's called being an adult." My father, recovering slightly, stepped in, his voice thick with a renewed, sputtering anger. "You're being callous. Have you no heart? She's an artist. Her spirit is too sensitive to be crushed by working at a Starbucks." "Then that is her choice," I said, shifting my gaze to him. Every word was deliberate, every emotion stripped away and stored for later. She can choose to protect her sensitive spirit, or she can choose to pay her rent. And I am making my choice. I choose to no longer finance irresponsibility. "You are tearing this family apart," he finally bellowed, his loss of control so complete that he was actually yelling. His raised voice drew the attention of the Marines at the gatehouse and a couple of junior enlisted men walking by. They slowed their pace, their eyes curious. I could feel their collective gaze on us, on this bizarre, messy civilian drama unfolding at the gates of their base. This was it, the end game. He had escalated in public, and now I would end it in public. I reached into my pocket, my movements calm and measured, and pulled out my phone. I opened my photos. I didn't have to search. The evidence was right at the top. It was the screenshot from Santa Barbara. Scarlet, poolside, cocktail in hand, Fendi bag on full display. I held the phone up, turning the screen so my father could see it clearly. I didn't say a word. I just let the image, in all its high-resolution, sun-drenched glory, speak for itself. "Is this the face of someone about to be homeless?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Or is this my $500 for the art fair?" The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant scream of a fighter jet. Scarlet's sobs choked in her throat as if a switch had been flipped. My father stared at the glowing screen, his mouth slightly agape. The confident, powerful real estate mogul was completely gone, replaced by a man who had been utterly and completely outmaneuvered. He had no words. There were no words. The picture was the truth, and it had detonated his entire argument, leaving nothing but smoke and rubble. I lowered my phone and slid it back into my pocket. "Your 5 minutes are up," I said, my voice crisp and final. "The 30-day notice stands. Do not come here again." I turned my back on them, got into my car, and started the engine. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the gate, past the silent, staring figures of my father and sister. I did not look in the rearview mirror. The battle was over, and I had won. As I drove away from the gates of Miramar, the adrenaline that had fueled my confrontation began to recede, like a tide going out, leaving behind a barren and unfamiliar shoreline. The victory I had felt in the heat of the moment evaporated, replaced by a profound sense of exhaustion that seemed to settle deep in my bones. I had won the battle, but there was no triumphant celebration. There was only a hollow, aching sadness. Back in my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked into the living room and sank onto the sofa, the silence of the room pressing in on me. I realized then that I hadn't just confronted my father and sister. I had confronted the idealized image of the family I'd always desperately wanted, the one where I was seen, valued, and loved unconditionally. That image, that lifelong hope, was the true casualty of the day's battle. It had been shattered beyond repair. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to cry. Not the performative tears of my sister, but silent, heavy tears that traced hot paths down my cheeks in the darkness. I wasn't crying out of weakness. I was mourning a fantasy. The fight was over, but the aftershock was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, they deployed every psychological tactic in their arsenal. The opening move came from my stepmother, Genevieve. She called one afternoon, her voice a syrupy blend of concern and gentle reproach. She spoke at length about how devastated my father was, how he couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. "He's just heartbroken, Olivia," she murmured. "You're the eldest daughter. It's on you to be the bigger person, to make peace." Next came Scarlett's campaign. She began sending me old photos from our childhood via text. The two of us with missing teeth, building a sandcastle in Coronado. Another of us on Christmas morning, buried in wrapping paper. Each image was accompanied by a short, wistful message. "Remember how we used to be? And I miss my big sister." It was a sophisticated pincer movement of guilt tripping, designed to breach my new defenses. A year ago, it would have worked. I would have caved. But the words from Brené Brown's book and the simple wisdom of the Serenity Prayer had become my shield. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It became my mantra. I couldn't change them, their behavior, their perceptions, their choices. But I could change how I responded. I could change me. To each attempt, my reply was polite, brief, and unwavering. I appreciate you reaching out, but I need some space right now. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply held the line. The real turning point, the moment that shifted my perspective for good, came on a quiet Saturday morning. I put on my dress blues to attend a memorial service for a gunnery sergeant from my old unit, a good man named Marcus who had been killed by an IED in Iraq. I stood at attention in the back of the chapel, listening to the eulogies, watching his young widow try to comfort their two small children. Their grief was a tangible thing, a physical presence in the room that was immense and absolute. And in the face of that monumental loss, my own family drama suddenly seemed small. The slights, the insults, the financial betrayals, they were real, they were painful, but they were not this. They were not a flag-draped coffin. They were not two children who would never see their father again. I realized that life was far too short and too precious to be wasted fighting endless, toxic wars on the home front. I didn't want to fight anymore. I just wanted peace. That evening, I sat down at my kitchen table with two pieces of plain stationery, one for my father, one for Scarlett. I wrote for hours, drafting and redrafting, not because I wanted the words to be sharp, but because I wanted them to be true. I didn't list my grievances or rehash old wounds. There was no accusation, only a simple statement of my own reality. To my father, I wrote, "Dad, I love you, but I cannot continue our relationship in the way we have been. For my own well-being, I need to be treated with respect. I forgive you for the past, not because it was okay, but because I need to let go of the anger I've been carrying. It's too heavy." To Scarlett, I wrote, "I will always love you as my sister, but I can no longer enable a lifestyle that is hurting both of us. The financial support is ending, as I said it would. I forgive you, not to excuse your actions, but to free myself from the resentment. Mailing those letters was one of the hardest things I've ever done." My hand trembled as I dropped them into the blue USPS mailbox. But as I walked away, a profound sense of release washed over me. Forgiveness, I finally understood, wasn't about building a bridge for them to cross back into my life. It was about closing a door behind me, firmly and finally, so that I could stop looking back and finally start walking forward into the quiet, open space ahead. 1 year later. I'm standing in the living room of my own condo in North Park, San Diego. The late afternoon sun streams through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and casting a warm glow on the freshly painted sea green walls. The faint, clean scent of new paint and sawdust still lingers, a smell I've come to associate with new beginnings. It's not a palace, not by La Jolla standards, but it's mine, every square inch of it. On the main wall, where a formal family portrait might hang in another home, I've hung a large antique-style map of the world. I've started a collection of small colored pins to mark the places the Marine Corps has sent me: the stark deserts of Afghanistan and Iraq, the lush green of Okinawa. Each pin is a testament, a reminder of the challenges that forged me into the person I am today. Next to the map, there's a large framed photograph of Liam and me, our faces bright with sweat and triumphant smiles at the summit of Cowles Mountain, the whole of San Diego sprawling beneath us. There are no awkward posed family photos on my walls. This home is decorated with evidence of a life I'm actively building for myself. This is a home built not on obligation, but on a foundation of hard-won peace. My relationship with my family, or what's left of it, has settled into a new, distant orbit. After I sent the letters, my father went silent for a long time. There were no more angry texts, no more attempts at contact through my stepmother. Then, around the holidays, a simple text appeared: "Merry Christmas," and another on New Year's Day: "Happy New Year." There was no apology, but there was also no criticism, no demands. It was a start, perhaps, a fragile truce established across a newly defined border, and Scarlett, well, Scarlett, faced with the sudden, irreversible loss of her primary income stream, was forced to do the one thing she had avoided her entire life. She was forced to grow up. She moved in with a friend to split the rent, got a part-time job at a coffee shop, and, to my genuine surprise, actually started selling her artwork on Etsy. She sends me a text every now and then, usually a hesitant question about my work or a simple, "Hope you're doing okay." The grand gilded bridge of obligation and dependency that once connected us has collapsed into the canyon below. But now, tentatively, we are beginning to build a new one in its place, smaller, simpler, but stronger, built on the solid bedrock of mutual respect. The doorbell rings, pulling me from my thoughts. Liam is standing there, holding a bottle of good champagne, a wide grin on his face. "To christen the new place," he says, stepping inside. Trailing behind him are a few of my closest friends from my unit, fellow Marines who have seen me at my best and my worst. There's no furniture yet, save for a few boxes, so we pop the champagne and sit on the hardwood floor in a circle, passing the bottle around. The room fills with laughter and the easy camaraderie that only comes from shared hardship. We trade stories from the service, the kind of dark humor that civilians never quite understand. Looking at their faces, illuminated by the setting sun, this group of smart, tough, loyal people who have my back without question, I feel a wave of gratitude so powerful, it almost brings me to tears. This is my family, my chosen family. And in this moment, I finally understand the true legacy of a soldier. It's not about the medals you earn or the battles you win on foreign soil. It's about taking the core lessons of our creed: honor, courage, commitment, and learning how to apply them to the quiet, often more difficult battles of everyday life. The greatest lesson, the final standing order I had to learn to follow, was that the most important loyalty you can ever have is to the person you see in the mirror. Later, after everyone has gone home, I stand alone on my small balcony, a cool breeze drifting in from the Pacific. I look out at the glittering expanse of city lights below. I am still Captain Olivia Anderson, United States Marine Corps. I still serve my country with every ounce of pride I possess. But I am no longer a soldier fighting a war on two fronts. I've secured my home base. I've established my boundaries. I've found my peace. As the sun finally dips below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, I know this isn't the end of a day. It's the dawn of a new life, one that I built myself. That peace I found wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. My story is proof that your past doesn't get to write your future. You do. The most important orders you will ever follow are the ones you give yourself: to be respected, to be valued, and to be free. Thank you for being my rear guard on this journey. If this story resonated with you and you're ready to hear more tales of strength, survival, and self-made victory, make sure you hit that follow button and turn on notifications. You are not alone on this battlefield.